one of the best old school refs, I think we could all agree, from the National Hockey League's the annals of history. He was a player, he was a ref, and he is now the ECAC Director of Officiating. I will pay this man the ultimate compliment. I never chanted his name and the word sucks from the cheap seats at the Meadowlands. He is Paul Stewart. Welcome to the Puck Daddy Radio Show, sir, with Wyshynski and Pizzo.
Thanks very much, but when my son, Maxwell, first went to kindergarten and they asked him to stand up and say his name, he said, Maxwell Robert Stewart sucks, and he learned it somewhere, so...
But of course. Well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Long been an admirer of your work and enjoyed speaking to you in the past. And first time I think you've been here on the Score with us. So, Stewie, Stanley Cup playoffs here. Looking at the entirety of the postseason, I think the one thing that's come to light is the fact that Colin Campbell is tired of the diving. He tells Eric Francis of the Sun Media this weekend, diving is increased in the playoffs as the stakes are higher, and when players get desperate, they take their credibility and their honor and they throw it out the window. Do you believe that diving increases in the postseason from your experience?
No, but I think perspectives change, because I can remember clearly and distinctly when Colin Campbell was coaching the New York Rangers, and I went over to his bench and told him, you tell that guy to stay on his feet, or I'm going to sit him on the other side of the rink. And he didn't like that when I told him that. And I always laugh when I see different players who have gravity issues. That's what I call it, gravity issues. And they tend to flip and they flop like a flounder out of the water. And basically what it comes down to is that everybody hates it when it happens to their team, but when the kid gets back to the bench for your team, everybody goes, way to go, Johnny, way to go. So what we need to do is stop having double standards. Colin Campbell in his position now, just as I do with the officiating, because I'm responsible for this type of play, and I hear the same things from my coaches, Mike Schaefer at Cornell, and now the new thing is, they go stick to stick. They slash the stick and they slash down low, and if the stick doesn't break, what they do is they drop it, as if they got slashed, with a Paul Bunyan type of swing, an axe. and basically, what we need to do is we need to have a perspective of what's acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And I used to tell guys, get up or I'll skate over your head. And or I'd go over and I'd say, to the coach, like I can remember saying to Jacques Martin one night in Ottawa, if I have to be guessing all night, you're not going to like it. So it basically is something I think that morality-wise, each coach has to coach and instill in their players. And I don't think this is a European thing or a Canadian thing or an American thing. I just think it's a risk and reward thing. And we have seen some certain players, Billy Barber back in the good old days with the Flyers, that was famous for that. And it all comes back down to don't get on the officials' case necessarily, because whether they call it or don't call it, because things are happening so fast out there, and these guys are thoroughbred athletes, that you don't know necessarily whether they have been, like last night I watched Thornton get slashed in the ankle, and it was like he got shot with a cannon, and he fell down, and he's got a bad ankle. I mean, but I remember in the 72 Canada Cup when Bobby Clark slashed Karloff behind the net and broke his ankle. Now that was a slash. The thing last night, I think I brushed my teeth harder than that.
Paul Stewart joining us. Paul, let's stay on that because we talked about that slash in the first half of the show. And this is where I find your job to be so difficult, because how do you guys watch that, say, after the game, you're watching highlight packs and you see that and think, this guy embarrassed me. How do you separate yourself? Because are there guys that you officiated and you think, I'm not giving him a penalty anymore if he's going to continue to embarrass me like that?
Well, I think, it's sometimes possible for even the referee to be fooled. And I remember in particular one night refereeing one of Joe Thornton's first games. Pat Burns was coaching. He got slashed on the wrist, and he got a broken hand. And it's possible that, and I know I didn't call a penalty, and it's possible that you can get fooled. But the way that these players are so padded now, and the way that the TV and the video make supplemental discipline such a reality, I think that the question now is, are they really hurt or not? And I was fortunate that when I first started officiating that I had a playing experience and I could transfer what I knew as a player over to being a referee. I could feel the game a little bit, so I had an advantage. Plus, the other thing is I had some great coaches teaching me about officiating, such as John McCauley and John Ashley. And I remember specifically Frank Udvari said to me one night in Springfield in the American League, if they did that to you, would you be ticked off? Yep, that's a penalty. So I think you need to feel the game out a bit, and if you can do that, then I think that's going to lend to the ability to keep the puck moving and the flow moving. And I used to have deals with Theo Fleury and Cicerelli because they were famous for gravity issues, and John Carter in Boston, and there were a bunch. And I used to say to them, stay on your feet, and I'll give you the green light. If you start flipping and flopping and try to show me up, I'm going to let Shell Samuelson or Scott Stevens or whomever run you over, and I'm going to look the other way.
Brilliant. That is great tactics. I hope they had a good quick education on that. Paul Stewart, Director of Officiating for ECAC, joining us here on Puck Daddy Radio with Wyshynski and Pizzo. Switching gears, I think one of the strangest officiating stories of the postseason, and maybe of the entire season, Stewie, was this whole ordeal with Steve Miller and the 2010 Stanley Cup winning puck that Patrick Kane shot, and whether or not this cat has the puck or not. Now, no one knows for sure what's going on, but I found it really odd that they pulled him at first from the second round of the playoffs. They weren't going to have him in the rotation. And it seemed to me that maybe it was because he spoke out of turn. He did some interviews with ESPN about this whole thing, didn't go through proper channels. My question to you is, do you think that the media should have more access to referees, or that the NHL should loosen the reins a little bit and allow you guys to explain actions more? Or do you think it's right that, let's keep these entities separate at all times when a referee is in a series?
Well, they hated to hear from me. Management hated it when I would talk, and they put the muzzle on me quite a bit. And I know Colin Campbell didn't like it, so of course he and a few others, Brian Lewis, didn't like it. But you know what? I can remember working for John McCauley. I ended up on the Today Show, and I ended up in ESPN. And when I got sick, they had lots of interviews with me. So I think whatever it is to serve the purpose, whatever serves the purpose. And frankly, I believe that my officials that work for me in college hockey are smart people, and they should know how to handle themselves on their feet. I think it's one area that perhaps the National Hockey League should school their coaches and players when they have it. How many times have we listened to interviews with players and you hear, and these guys, they can't talk. Well, teach them how to talk, and make them representative. And one other pet peeve I have in the playoffs, this is our chance to shine and showcase the game and attract more fans. And when I watch the games now and I see these guys with the beards and the playoff whiskers and the whole thing, I mean, it looks like a hoedown in northern Tennessee. So I'm not a big fan of that, and I think here we all go along with trying to showcase our guys, and my Gillette stocks go way down in April and May.
Hey Stewie, let me ask you though, like specifically though, after say there's a playoff game, there's a controversial call in the playoff game. Now usually the refs aren't talking after the game, right? Do you think that there should be, you bring the ref in to meet the media, much like the coaches meet the media, or do you think that's just kind of begging for trouble?
No, well, they have a policy in place where they have a pool reporter can go in.
Yeah, pool reporter, right? Yeah,
and he can speak to the the supervisor. There's a supervisor at every game, and I think that policy's fine because listen, officiating always becomes front burner issue in the playoffs. and I hear you talking about Steve Miller and the puck and all of that. I mean, it's so much smoke and mirrors. Talking about pucks, I refereed the last game ever played at Boston Garden, and I went to center ice and dropped the puck, and the puck went back and forth, and then the play was offside, and it ended up in my feet, and I picked it up and stuck it in my back pocket, and I pulled another puck out and handed it to him. And, of course, the Hockey Hall of Fame thinks they have the puck, and I think I have the puck. So who do you think's right?
Wow!
I think the guy with the puck is right. Well done, sir. Where is that, rec room for you, or is it trophy case? Where is it?
Well, you'll have to get by my Yorkie and my Chihuahua if you want to get a look at those babies.
I could take the Chihuahua. I don't know about the Yorkie, but I could take the Chihuahua, I think, with force.
Didn't you ever hear that? I was taking my Chihuahua for a walk down, and I said, I'm going in to have a beer, and the fellow said, you can't go in there and have a beer if you have a dog. I said, no problem, and I put my dark glasses on. I walked in, I said, I'll have a beer, please, and the fellow said, we don't serve people with dogs in here. I said, I'm sorry, that's my guide dog. And he leaned over the bar and said, since when is a Chihuahua a guide dog? I said, they gave me a Chihuahua?
Wow, Paul Stewart, former official in the National Hockey League and apparently a phenomenal storyteller. Last one before we let you go, Paul. You mentioned Colin Campbell as a coach and hearing him complain and bitch and moan. And this year on 24/7 on HBO, we saw a side of Bruce Boudreau that we don't ordinarily get to see. A lot of F-bombs, a lot of, sauce on the face, and a lot of other cool stuff. If you could take a coach that you had to deal with a lot during your career and make him be in a 24/7, who would be the most entertaining to watch?
Well, I always liked Pat Quinn. And the reason being, once he threw a piece of gum at a linesman on a Wednesday in Toronto, I was in Montreal, and I ended up having to go into Toronto on Saturday. And on the way to the rink, I stopped by the 7-Eleven, and I picked up about 20 packs of gum. And when he came out, I walked over. I said, here, this is for you. He said, what do you mean? I said, I want you to have lots of ammo and lots of stuff that won't stick to my upper plate.
Oh, man. I wish we could have you on for the next 4 hours and just ask you story after story. Paul Stewart, now the supervisor of fishing.
You have to read my book. It's coming out.
How can we get your book? How can the people who are listening get your book?
Well, we're working on it now, and it's called You Wanna Go, and it's the story of my my life, and basically a walk through the world as Paul Stewart, and we're going to be. I'm working on it right now. I'm trying to think of all sorts of fun things to talk about. So,
Chapter 12, appearing on Puck Daddy Radio.
Well,
is your book going to be better than Frasier's?
Everybody has an opinion and a good story to tell, and Bruce Hood's had his, and Vern Buffy, and I think that we'll just let it stand on its own merit. And like all books. Along the way, there's a catcher in the rye, and then there's.
He's got better hair. If he has better hair and a better book, I don't know what you do, Stewie.
That was the toughest fight I ever had in the National Hockey League. The night that Fraser and I worked, the very first game that they ever used two referees and two linesmen in a modern day game. It was in March. I was in Madison Square Garden, and the Leafs played the Rangers, and people afterwards, they had a press conference, and they asked us about working together and, how many penalties were called and so on. I said, the only problem I had during the game was trying to get to the mirror.
Paul Stewart. Thanks so much
Director
for coming
of officiating for ECAC. Thank you so much, man.
There was a big shortage of hair gel that night.
Oh, I'm sure. Take care, man. Thank you so much for joining us here on Puck Daddy Radio. Paul Stewart, a man of many stories, a man of many tales, a man who has entertained you for a good 20 minutes here on Puck Daddy Radio.